an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, here we go. It's the 23rd day of May. It's a Tuesday to kick off the week in this part of the world, coming off the long holiday weekend, Victoria Day. This part of the world didn't feel a whole lot like we were turning into summer, so it would have been a lovely day in March. Maybe Saturday and Sunday. Although we had a fair amount of rain, but I'm told it's good for the garden. There you go. Lots going on this week, and of course, it always feels like everybody gets excited about long holiday weekends. I just find it means you got to do 6 days of work in 4 days. So there we go. So now and next, today, right through until Thursday, and we've got a few things to chat about. We have been running, by the way, on Thursdays. It's Feed Drop Thursday on Now and Next, and we have been featuring the first show we produced at Story Studio Network, and it was The Next Normal. And it's really kind of interesting to hear how our Next Normal roundtable of Avengers sat there and they laid out, here's how we can build back better. Here are the solutions. Here are the opportunities that came out of COVID. It's a 2-year-old show, and it's incredibly current. So I was listening back to it just to say, these are the things we should be doing around urban planning and food deserts and how we create resilience. We have to encourage the creation and development of resilience in our systems, in our infrastructure, in our own kind of political thinking. Anyway, if you haven't had a chance, go back and check out last Thursday, and you can put an ear on the Next Normal. Sarah Thorne, Decision Partners, is the one who leads the conversation that last week. And, of course, Sarah's also the host and producer of the EWN podcast, Engineering with Nature. That's going to kick off again in a couple of weeks. I think next week we drop the trailer for season 6. So quite a back catalog, I should say, there as well. Kind of cool stuff, and talk about some of the innovations around dealing with the climate change, etc., and using nature and nature-based solutions to get there. I know you think U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, those are the folks who are sponsoring this program. You think about, huge machinery and concrete and rebar. Not in this conversation. They're talking about nature-based solutions. They're using 3D printing techniques to rehabilitate reefs off the coast of the U.S. So it's cool. Some really cool stuff. So check out Engineering with Nature if you get a chance as well. All right, this is Now and Next. I'm Dave Trafford. It is Story Studio Network. And a couple things popped up over the weekend I want to get into. But first, just reassembling some sort of getting back to old stomping grounds with guests today. Kim Gedded is here. And, of course, you've heard Kim as the host and producer on One Click to Cyber Chaos with Jeff Musson. And Barb DiGiulio is a friend of the show, has been on often. And we can't say exactly, but we can tell you that Barb is going to be contributing to Story Studio Network in the coming weeks. So we're quite excited about having Barb in the circle of friends here at Story Studio Network. And we just make sure that, both Kim and Barb bring their own newsroom and journalistic perspectives to the whole thing. So this is going to be a kind of a cool project. So welcome in. I hope you guys had good weekends.
Good morning.
Good morning. Great to see everybody.
Yeah, it's, it's a few things that came up over the weekend. And I've said this several times about the polls in Toronto vis-a-vis as we wade through this mayoral election in Toronto. I talked to David Coletto. He is at Abacus Data. And he, right off the bat, weeks ago, said that the horse race numbers are meaningless. They're entirely meaningless. There's no way that you can actually do an effective poll on the horse race without it actually pushing people to a certain name or an idea. Because in order to do it properly, Kim, we'd have to say, Kim, are you planning to vote in the Toronto mayoral election? And if you said, what mayoral election, or no, okay, then we would move on. But at the same time, if I just said, well, who are you going to vote for? And you would have to come up with a name off the top of your head. That's not what's happening here. They're offering all of these choices. They're saying the names out loud, or they're actually writing them down in terms of an online ballot. This is, to me, literally a test of name recognition, not who is going to get the most votes in a campaign. Now, I realize that there's a close relationship between the two of them, but what we're testing right now is merely name recognition. Olivia Chow surfaces in the Toronto Star and their forum research poll, don't get me started, is saying she's unassailable. Well, we've still got 4 or 5 weeks to go. I've never, leading wire to wire based on that kind of polling. I'm just not sure.
I agree. And you're right. They are, in terms of the methodology, they're loading the question right off the top. It's like, well, okay, out of those 5 names you gave me, I guess I'll pick this one. Kind of heard a bit about that person or whatever. You know something? I have lived in Toronto 25 years, and I can't believe I am less interested in this election than I've ever been in any municipal election. And it's Olivia Chow by name recognition. I mean, I said that when she first entered the race. And I'm following this. I can't tell you what her exact policy is, costed numbers, what exactly she is promising line by line. I get it's got to be a nicer, a safer, affordable city. And that's all I hear in talking points moving forward. But I'm not hearing any kind of meat behind the message. And I'm not hearing reporters asking for details. And to your point, we've got 5 weeks left. I guess I'll actually really dive into this 2 weeks out on election day.
Yeah, I think, Barb, that's kind of the wave and the momentum that we can probably expect for those who are feeling, okay, I guess I better start paying attention to this. It's sort of the way you would say you'd look at a provincial campaign, right? You don't, the first 2-3 weeks, yeah, okay, whatever's going on. Then we're going to kind of drill down once we get some debates of meaning. But having said that, I did sat in on the debate that the Daily Bread folks hosted last week. And to Kim's point, a lot of niceties being floated around by all the candidates, but particularly Chow. All we have heard since then, though, is that the price tag for her ideas, her new Toronto, is $400 million and is ready to raise taxes to do so. I don't understand how Chow or not, anybody who's going to talk about raising taxes in the same breath as saying we need to make the city more affordable. I don't understand how that jives at all. So the confusion out there is only compounded by the lack of information, shall we say.
I think both of you have touched on it. It's a lot of catchphrases that I'm hearing, and I'm hearing it from or hearing them from a lot of the candidates. We need more affordable housing. We need safer TTC. We need to make the city safer. Going back to your point about cold calling people and asking who they're going to vote for, or the mayoral election. What mayoral election? Okay, so let's take it from there, because I think there are a number of people who are just either not engaged or too busy in their lives to really focus on another election. And then the next step is them seeing or hearing all of these, Olivia Chow's a front runner, Olivia Chow's a front runner. So does somebody who decides, well, I'm not really into it, but I am going to go and vote. Well, they're saying she's the front runner, so I might as well I know the name, I might as well just vote for her. I think there are a lot of people who aren't as engaged as we are in the media. And we sometimes have to take a step back and look at that and realize that people do get persuaded by, well, that person's saying there's going to be affordable housing. What does that even mean? What does affordable housing mean? Are we building more? Are we building units that are going to be 50,000 each? No, that's not going to happen. Is it going to be through raised taxes? Well, nobody really wants to talk about that. Nobody really wants to hear about that. I worry about people just voting based on name recognition. And, to Kim's point, you said that this is probably the least interesting to you. In some ways, I find it quite intriguing just because it's such an open field. When Tory was running and then running again, that to me was like, no, okay, it's probably going to go to Tory. And it did. This one, it's anybody's guess, unless you believe that Olivia Chow is that far ahead of everyone else.
So let me suggest then, Kim, you and I belong to the Recovering News Directors organization.
How many members are in that group, by the way?
A lot.
Is that a Toronto chapter?
We are active members.
There's a Bell Media chapter.
Oh, yeah.
And growing.
Yeah. But so let's put that back to you, because as I have watched this, and I have argued, and I've said so on John Moore's show on News Talk 1010, that the polls in themselves are just a means of earned media for all of these candidates. Mm-hmm. That the reason that the names are getting out there is because, and we're doing it right now, but is because the media is actually picking up on this as if it's a story about who's going to win the election, rather than, as we have said, it really only is testing name recognition. So where's the editorial lens here that we have to really sharpen to kind of make Barb's point and understand where the nuances are, or are we sort of tilting at windmills here?
Well, and you raise a really good point, and I heard John Wright on another radio station talking about these polls and how precarious they are in terms of the methodology, and that is back on us as news directors, as reporters, to inform how they have gone about their methodology and being transparent. You don't have the resources that we used to have. You don't have reporters telling how the poll was put together. People find that uninteresting, to pull back the veil and really dig into that. But that is where talk show hosts and long form coverage in terms of reporters and reporting should be. I haven't heard any of that. And it going back to, like, I find this a very uninteresting mayor's race, and I should be so interested. There are so many huge concerning issues facing this city that this should be what everyone is talking about in terms of safety and affordability. Those are huge issues in this city, and I'm not as engaged as I will be maybe a week from the election. So there's a problem there.
Well, part of the problem too is, there's this whole, I think there's a pundit's handbook, Barb, that's 101 post-debate. The first thing you have to worry about is making sure, if you got nothing to say, criticize the format, right? I mean, that's where we go right off the bat. And after the Daily Bread debate, I heard criticism. Well, look at the set. I mean, it looked awful. Really?
Who cares?
It was in the fucking warehouse at the Daily Bread food bank, and the whole point was affordability, and people are 270,000 people visit the food bank on a monthly basis. Yeah, it's back to the studs. It's this is not about glitz, glamour, and lights and camera. Go. We're missing the point here on so many levels.
I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, I don't know. Does it matter? Who cares what the backdrop is? Are you listening? Or, again, are you just looking for the sound bites? Affordable housing, safer city. And do you want flash? Do you want lights? Do you want neon? Or are you paying attention to what people are saying? You really have to listen and align yourself with the person who represents you the most. Not worry about what they're wearing or what the set looks like or whether there's an MC.
Well, it'll be also interesting to see how some of the major debates break down, because I think Daily Bread was sort of the first one out of the gate after nominations closed with, 102 or 107,
yeah.
Some stupid number. One of them's a dog. And from now on, other organizations are going to be holding theirs. This week, the Toronto Region Board of Trade is going to hold its version of the debate at Isabel Bader Theatre down on University, right across from the museum at Victoria College. And it'll be curious to see not only what the talking points are, but who shows up. I think it's significant that Mark Saunders was not at that debate for the Daily Bread Food Bank, claiming that, well, we had another event, we just couldn't move. So what was more of a priority than talking about affordability, food security, safe TTC? I mean, what could, Kim, have been more important for a candidate who considers himself a frontrunner than not being there? I'm told, now this may be shifting, but early on, his people did not want him participating in these debates.
Why?
Because he can't handle it. Olivia would eat him alive.
But I had heard reporting that he was at a mini debate on CP24 a couple weeks prior. There were very few candidates there, but he was one of them. And I think I heard, correct me, but that he did say that in the questioning of where were you, where were you, where were you? So he can't handle it. Yeah, I kind of agree. What was, I didn't find him dynamic and forceful and in control and a leader as the chief of police. So I'm questioning, what's his end game? Why is he doing this? Because he's not going to be mayor.
Mm-hmm. Well, this morning, I heard commentary, Barb, suggesting that there has to be a break on the right, that Olivia has the left lane all to herself. So even if you're just going to vote left-right, who's the left candidate? Okay, that's where we're going to go. But you need to have the break on the right. And the question is, where does that break happen, right? And if it's Saunders, all of a sudden it's a pretty interesting game. If it's somebody like Anna Bailau or Brad Bradford, less so. Anyway, that dynamic, I think, over the next couple of weeks is going to be the thing to watch in the campaign before we get to the 2-week period where Kim's going to be engaged.
I think Saunders is an interesting candidate because, similar to Olivia Chow, I think that for people who aren't as fully engaged and aren't watching every single debate, it's also going to be a name recognition thing. People find comfort in a name they're familiar with. And if they can, I think his team is hoping, if they can make the connection back to Mark Saunders, police chief, Mark Saunders saying we've got to make the TTC safer, we've got to make the city safer, that maybe that will sway people. And perhaps his team is thinking the less he says, the better. Why wouldn't you want to be involved in one of these debates? Why wouldn't you want to put yourself out there if you can hold your own, if you can take on your toughest opponent? It just doesn't make sense to me. As Kim mentioned, why wouldn't you prioritize something like that?
Well, a lot of bad things happened in terms of safety under his watch as police chief. And he's going to wear those questions, right? So to Dave's point, can he handle that? Maybe not. But Dave, you're so adamant he should have been there. We don't know. We do know that Saunders has had health problems in the past. So we don't know. Maybe there was something going on there, right?
Okay. But nobody even pressed him on, where are you? Where are you going to be? Well, nobody pressed him.
And then I would suggest if there is even a hint of a health issue preventing him from going to a debate, that does not help his case, in my opinion, in terms of, do we want this person voted in as our next mayor? Is there any concern there that they would be able to fulfill the duties of the job? And also, when it comes to his record as police chief, I think if the less he says, the better idea, a lot of people won't remember or may not remember all of it. I really maintain that the average person in the city is so much less connected that we in the media are. And I don't know about you guys, but I see it in people I know and people I talk to. They're just not as up to speed on all of the little things that we know and that we remember.
Dave, I just want to push back on, you said, nobody pressed him on, where were you? Reporters did ask him, why aren't you attending this debate? A prior commitment, was already in our schedule. We just could not move it. I think you're asking, the reporters didn't ask him the right question. What would be more important than this debate at the food bank on food insecurity and blah, blah, blah?
Good point.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and there's the accountability level. And here's what we have unwittingly done. We have speculated on why he didn't show up, and we turned it into a negative because we brought up health issues. If it had been Citizen Saunders, we never would have gone there.
Mm-hmm.
Barb goes where, I think everybody would go and say, well, if you're not well enough to there's
no
indication
suggestion
that
of
it's
that.
Nothing at all.
No.
Right? At all. So I'm just not sure of who's kind of steering that ship for them. But again, I just say, it'll be interesting to see if, in fact, with these debates now becoming that much more important, the Board of Trade event is going to be, I think, probably one of them. I know that the construction industry is holding one at George Brown this week as well. So there are going to be some larger issues here around infrastructure beyond, safety on the TTC. And can he manage that? Just one thing before we move on. One of the things that strikes me as really interesting on this campaign, though, is the degree to which the campaigns are living on Twitter. And for the three of us, makes sense. We live on Twitter. But that's where the media lives, right? And that's where the trolls live. And that's where the organizers live. The political intelligentsia lives there. The average person that you're talking about, Barb, doesn't live there. So I'm wondering, and I just watched a lot of this on the weekend and how much of that activity was happening on Twitter. And if you talk to John Wright, he'll tell you like 7% of people get their news from Twitter. So it's a very small group, but active and animated and engaged group. I just wonder, I'd be curious to do a post-election review and see how many people who voted were actually active on Twitter and have active followings on Twitter.
You know what I don't know? Because I am on Twitter. I'm on Instagram and hardly ever go there, hardly ever use it. I'm not on TikTok. But I wonder if those same videos or that same content is also being used on Instagram and TikTok. Because frightening to me, a lot of people I know also get their news from those sources and spend a lot of their day on those social media outlets. So I think social media as a whole and how it plays into this will be interesting to look back on. I can't fall on the sword to, go on Instagram and TikTok and follow that. But I definitely think that candidates are making more use out of social media in an attempt to reach people. And a lot of people, especially young people, they're just not watching TV. They're not watching TV news. They're not listening to the radio like we listen to the radio. Young adults, they're streaming. They're not. It's the habits have changed.
Yeah, the fastest growing podcast audience is 18 to 34.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. Because they can select what they want. They can listen on demand. They can have a variety of points of view and so on. So,
well,
but go ahead, Kim. Yeah.
I'll tell you why the candidates in this campaign and politicians and anyone, they're on Twitter because it's the press release distribution service of the day. So that's where they're getting their message out. That's where the reporters live, to your point. And so that's how they get their stories told in papers, on radio, in podcasts, on television. And the public has never been engaged in Twitter as they are in other, traditional media. They just aren't. They just won't. And so it's just a news distribution service. So that's where reporters decide, oh, well, everyone else is on this, or there's the video from Brad Bradford. That's going to be part of my story today. That's why.
So they're appealing. They're
there.
appealing to the media by being on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. The public's, they know the public's not on there.
All right. So last week round one was launched in the Peel Region Cage match. The premier saying, yep, we're going to split up Peel and away we go. And then to hear Bonnie Crombie and Patrick Brown go at it hammer and tong. I mean, Patrick Brown called her a liar on John Moore's show on News Talk 1010. Okay, here we go. he dialed some of that back. But, even in the midst of all that, of course, there was the conversation around whether or not Mayor Crombie was going to take a shot at the Liberal leadership here in Ontario at the federal gathering in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago. She was already out there. Her team was saying that we're, just kind of checking out the lay of the land to see what kind of mood there would be for a Crombie candidacy for the leadership here in the province. And then it sort of evolved a little further, and the question now became, well, if Doug has kind of done this, does this mean she's less likely to run? Over the weekend, no doubt about it, our friend Sabrina Nanji popped up with the Bonnie Crombie website, and apparently before it was supposed to be exploratory, this whole idea, except there's a page in there that says why I'm running. And I found the page. Good on her, but oh shit, that wasn't supposed to go out. So they took it down, moved the page, and put it back up to be exploratory again. A long list of Liberal heavyweights, Liberal organizers, Liberal candidates from across the province. I heard her again this morning talking more about what she's doing. She wants the job in no uncertain terms, explicitly saying so, Barb. But right now is in listening so that she can actually, saying she's in listening mode so she can actually determine what it is Ontarians want. To hear her, she's already got the speeches down. I mean, she's ready to go. So I wonder, and we didn't get to this question in any of the interviews, how much listening is she doing from organizers of other possible candidates? How many other people are going to get into this? She wants some competition, but it's going to be, why are you in it? And who is in it? And how is the organization of the party going to be able to accommodate these new members? Because they have to have them all done by September. So it's a pretty short runway. Anyway, I just think that the listening, we're all focusing on listening to Ontarians. I think she's got to be listening to people in the party.
I think this is all, the timing of it all is so interesting, considering that last week was the divorce, right? And now we're on to, I found my next thing, just got divorced, I'm moving on. I think that I have to hand it to everyone in politics, and I do, because when I see all of the candidates out at all of these events, every day they're grinding. And to think that she is doing her job right now, involved in this divorce of Peel Region, but also looking toward the Liberal leadership and the candidacy for the Liberal leadership. I think she could do well, and I think people are telling her she could do well, and she's got a great presentation. She seems to be very popular among the people. I think the Liberals are looking for someone who has that appeal, and I feel like that's been missing for a while. So I'm really not surprised that she is listening to this. I just think it's interesting how much is going on all at the same time. And I know that she has said she's going to see her Mississauga duties through. She is not going to step away. I don't know how you do both. I got to hand it to her. Not a surprising move, though. It was interesting to hear, but really not surprising in so many ways.
Remember asking her whether or not she was going to consider the leadership after Kathleen Wynne's demise, Kim, and she said, not right now.
Yeah. And
then I asked her again at the end of the 2022, where she had just been reelected as mayor, and it was evident that, they were going to be looking for a Liberal leader. And I asked her then, well, I've got a big job here in Mississauga, and she's gone from that in 4 short months or 5 short months to, I want the job.
And what did that tell you? Because her answers were not definitive.
Oh,
no.
Entirely. You're right. They were never in. No.
Exactly. And so as journalists, you're like, okay, this is the person to watch because she has not been definitive. And no, I don't want to run the Liberal Party of Ontario. So yeah, she's just biding her time. I've always been intrigued by the strategy behind political decisions like this. I would hazard a guess that yes, it's been a year at least, maybe a little bit longer, that she has been talking with the machine of the Ontario Liberal Party in terms of whether she should go for this or not. How does she do it? When does she do it? what's hanging in the balance. The conversations about dissolving Peel Region have been talked about for years. She's got to cross that hurdle. So in terms of listening mode, Dave, and listening to members of the Liberal Party, well, it sounds like she has enormous support. So she's listening for how to maneuver this moving forward, because Peel Region's got to be dissolved by what, 2025?
Yeah.
And then how does she then go full bore in terms of running her campaign?
Provincial election would be 2026.
26?
Yeah. So it all fits nicely. And I have suggested that she's stronger as a leader and has more latitude as the leader if she does not take a seat in the legislature until the election. That in fact, she can go out and actually be front and center in the Peel Region discussion. She can be knocking on doors and doing organizing in 905, where she'll obviously be strong, but could be stronger. And I think last week, Steve Clark, who is the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, might have made a mistake, Barb, when he answered the NDP's first question about how can the people of Brampton trust this government when it comes to breaking up Peel. And she cited, these studies that they had done in 2019, and we haven't seen the details of the survey. Clark's answer was, well, it's interesting that the leader of the official opposition did not mention the results of the most recent campaign, the election campaign in 2022, and all of those seats in 905 are blue. They're all Conservative government seats. And I thought, okay, you just poked the bear, pal, because if Crombie runs, guess what?
Yep.
It might be, you combine blue and red, you get purple, and it's going to be a bruising campaign.
Yeah, and I think that for anybody who doesn't follow this stuff as closely, as you guys have both mentioned, these talks have been going on for a long time. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. The party has been talking to her and probably checking in with her every so often. And I think this is something that, if it does happen, has been well thought out. And maybe the timing is just right for her now. I think, it should be interesting to see what happens moving forward. But I think she's taken the right approach. Walk, don't run to where you want to be next.
This is the election that I'm actually excited about, because we have a formidable candidate and one who could really give Doug Ford a run for his money.
All right. I want to finish on a note I sent you guys over the weekend, and I was in the car driving and listening to, as I do want to listen to my selected podcasts. And I'm a fairly regular listener to The Daily, the New York Times podcast. And aside from Michael Barbaro's affectation as a host,
Yeah.
I quite enjoy the show. And it's funny when anybody fills in for him, by the way, they have the same affectation.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who noticed that. Yeah. Okay.
You'll know. Okay. So
News director is constantly air checking, eh?
So I think it was it was Thursday's show. And it was a really interesting story. And it was about the New York Times coverage of the Me Too campaign, and particularly the story of the chair of CBS being fired for, inappropriate behavior, et cetera. And because he was outed, he lost his $120 million severance. So in and of itself, it was a salacious story. The reporter who covered the story, who broke the story, who wrote a book about it, got some notoriety because of it. She actually interviews the whistleblower, who is a lawyer, who was hired to actually do the investigation, this third-party investigation into what was going on. Her concerns, i.e. the lawyer, was that this was going to be done to protect CBS as much as it was to get to the bottom of what happened. Long story short, I'm going to suggest you go and listen to the podcast because it's really cool. But on the one hand, you've got the lawyer, a woman, who just hands over files to the New York Times and shows them what's happening, violates client privilege, knows it going in, and then the New York Times publishes it. Of course, they don't say who it is. Needless to say, the way these things played out, this woman gets found out. The law firm lets her go. Now in Washington, D.C., she's not allowed to practice law. Her license has been suspended, etc. There are so many worms in that can. Public interest, Kim, will always be one of those things where, we in the newsroom would say, we can do this because it's public interest. You might say that here. But I worry about the ethics, not only of the lawyer who is violating the client privilege. Well, it's your call. Do you actually use that information from her? I mean, how do you play that?
I've been grappling with this question since Saturday when I listened to it. But I found this very confusing, the podcast, and I came away with this question. What was the point of this story, telling Allie's the lawyer? What was the point of telling Allie's story? Was it in the public interest? Was it a cautionary tale to everyone? If you're going to leak confidential information, you could blow up your entire world as a result. Was it, part of the Me Too movement? And Allie was trying to, expose even more wrongdoing by CBS and Les Moonves. And I walked away thinking, no. Was it in the public interest? This was a story about the impact on Allie, the leaker, and the impact on the reporter telling the story. It was a feature, and I'm like, and so what? Because it wasn't a Me Too incident for me. She was not the victim of harassment or sexual assault by a man. Allie made the assumption and made the determination, I don't think CBS will follow up on the recommendations from my law firm. I don't feel strongly that my senior lawyers will make the right recommendations as I give them the information in these files. So I'm going to take matters in my own hand and link this information to the press. She had a couple of options. She could have gone to her bosses in the law firm and explained her concerns. And she's not even a whistleblower. A whistleblower is someone who informs on someone or some organization where there is a legal activity going on and a cover-up. There was no evidence of any of that. So what was the purpose of this story?
Barb?
So this is so interesting. I don't look at it as much from the point of view as do we tell the public this story if you're the New York Times. I look at it from the point of view of someone who is a lawyer, who works for a law firm, who has been hired by CBS to do this investigation into alleged wrongdoing. It hadn't even been completed. So we're in the process. I'm not even going to say early in the process. We're in the process. And Allie, the lawyer, starts to get this idea, I think regardless of our findings, CBS will perhaps use it to sort of sweep things under the rug, to continue to cover up for Les Moonves, who is the person in question here. And what I also got from this was this sense of needing to be the star of a story, even anonymously, because she sends information to the New York Times. The New York Times reporter says, it's like a gift when you're working on a story, and all of a sudden, all of this information just gets dumped in your lap, right? So how are you going to say no to that? It's part of your story. You're not identifying the person who's giving you the information, although for a lawyer, you should be a little bit smarter than to think you wouldn't eventually get found out. And the lawyer, Allie, even admits she got a rush from doing this. I got a sense in listening to this, and it's so important to listen to the voices and to the people and to how they're speaking. I got a sense she's not cut out to be a lawyer, because in law, you have the attorney-client privilege. I guarantee you, regardless of the kind of law you practice, you are going to run into things where it doesn't quite sit with you morally, but you've taken this oath and you've agreed to represent clients. And hey, there's a reason why criminal defense attorneys don't ever want to ask their client, did you actually kill the person? Because they don't want to know. It's not about that. It's about presenting a proper defense. And people have a right to a defense. So I go back to this and say with Allie, so she's been suspended. She can apply to have her standing reinstated, but she's been told that the law firm will fight tooth and nail to prevent that from happening. And I can't see after all of this how she would ever be able to be in another law firm in any kind of lawyer situation, because I think it shows that she can't be trusted.
There's so much I want to say. So
Go.
David, I'm so glad we are having this discussion, because this is the kind of discussions we had in newsrooms about stories, like this. So, in terms of why is Allie coming forward now and going public? Well, I expected to hear at the end of the podcast, and here's the GoFundMe campaign to help Allie recuperate all her losses. She's, just lost everything by what she's done. And let me put this on you, Dave. When I listened to it, she sounded to me, my visceral reaction was naive and childlike. And she's a lawyer. You know full well, when you start leaking information like this, shit's gonna hit the fan. At least you should. She's an adult. She came to you with this information. Do you run it? I say, yeah, you do.
I think that the New York Times took advantage of this woman.
I'm glad you're going
Really?
there. Discuss. I have
Yes.
something to say about that too, in terms
Because
of feeling
to your
exploited.
point, what you picked up on was this need to be, my family was going to know that I was involved in a case that was making a difference, was one of her first things she said. That was before she leaked anything. That she was vulnerable in as much as she was doing this because somehow she felt like she needed to be, the center of attention in an anonymous way. It's a very curious thing. And I don't know this woman clearly, but based on this discussion, it is evident to me that within 5 minutes of having a chat over whatever beverage they were drinking, that would have been conveyed to the reporter, that the reporter should have picked up on, ooh, this woman she's in trouble to some degree. There's some level of despair or whatever you want to call it without diagnosing her. But she's vulnerable. And I didn't get any sense in the podcast where the Times or the reporter specifically said, you realize what's happening here. Are you sure you want to do this? Because you sound like you want to be part of the story just to satisfy an itch. And I'm happy to take the material. But are you okay? I mean, I'm being clumsy with my language. But that's the first thing that occurred to me when I heard her talking about how she cringes at her own ideas. She used that phrase over and over and over again, right? So to me, I don't know. I put it back to you guys. I would really struggle with using that amount of it, or going as far as they did with the whole thing.
Yeah.
I
agree with you. Sorry, Barb, but I agree with you. But it did feel like the reporter was taking advantage of Allie. But then I came back to she's a grown adult and a lawyer, and that is a full stop for me. At the very end of the podcast, Rachel, the reporter, makes an effort to say, I felt really, I struggled with doing this, or I felt bad about doing this. Why is she doing this? She knew full well that she was into an area with Allie that, should I be here? Why else would she say, I felt bad about doing this?
Well, because she got found out and lost her job. That's when she said, that's the impression I got. The Times reporter felt badly about it when she saw how it eventually, the outcome affected.
Right. So
Allie.
As a reporter, how could you not know that was going to happen?
That's my point.
And the reporter's career takes off while the lawyer's career gets tanked. But how can the lawyer think, if there are 35 lawyers working on this investigation and you are leaking documents, how can you think it's not going to come back to you? They have ways to see who is working on what at what time. And frankly, listening to this woman, Allie, I'm surprised she made it through law school. I'm surprised she made it through all of what is involved and what it takes to become a lawyer, not just from the ethics point of view, but from the maturity point of view. I think that what happened here, the way I look at this whole situation from Allie's perspective is it's possible to do what is morally right and ethically wrong. And I think that's what got her. But you have to decide. You have to decide. And I don't know, it scares me to think that she went to the Times not thinking there was a possibility that this could blow up her entire career. It goes against everything you're supposed to stand for as a lawyer. And again, the investigation hadn't even been completed. I think she wanted to be, as Dave says, in some weird way, because it's anonymous, she wanted to be a part of this story and standing up for women in the Me Too situation, and be part of this taking down of this massive figure, Les Moonves. And it seemed to feed a need in her in some ways as well.
Mm-hmm. David,
says the mother of the lawyer, by the way, we should just point out.
And the father of the lawyer, right? Not the same lawyer.
Not the same lawyer, to be clear.
And David, we've had these conversations in newsrooms over the years when someone we've interviewed, they just don't, it sounds like they're having challenges. It sounds like they are in need of some kind of support. And we make the decision, don't air that audio because it's not, we're taking advantage of them. But
would that person be in more of a victim situation, though, a personal, when you're talking about that dilemma? Because as we've pointed out, she was removed from this. She wasn't a victim in the Me Too situation, which I think is different when you look at, well, do you really want to expose yourself or go ahead with this?
And I can't imagine that the New York Times reporter and the editors and the news director did not have these conversations we're having right now about, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm hearing, do we run with this? Of course they had that conversation.
But why then was it not part of the show?
But to me, it was. The reporter went to great lengths to really describe Allie and her sounding unclear and having this moral ambiguity and, didn't really sound strong and really got excited when she was talking to a reporter. That was spelled out to me
very clearly.
Sure, that it was obvious, but I don't know that the managing editor or, to your point, anybody else up the food chain was saying, maybe can we lawyer this conversation? By the way, I mean, if we were going to do this, full well that we would have had a room full of lawyers.
Oh yeah.
Around the table saying, okay, here's what we can and here's what we should. And the way they got caught was such a stupid thing, right? When they talked about the 59-page report. I mean, what a boneheaded thing to write.
Yeah.
So the Times actually accelerated and exposed her, unwittingly or not. So to me, like, there is a level of responsibility that the Times has for.
You're talking about Bobby Phillips?
No, they had that report. They cited a report that was 59 pages long, and that raised a flag for the law firm, right? And they knew, okay, here's who was involved.
But can either of you imagine this whole process without the New York Times consulting lawyers? They must have. Do you think it's
entirely? Yeah. That's my whole point. Is if you're going to tell the whole story, then it would have been helpful for the reporter to say, after I met with her, we sat down, we talked about these 5 things that kind of were red flags for us, and we decided to still go ahead with it. Like, to me, it was incomplete reporting, which sounds odd when you're talking about the New York Times.
Yeah, journalism is what you include, and what is omitted is a question mark, and that's to your point. Yeah. So I would run with it. You wouldn't have.
Well, I would. My worry is the degree to which. No, I'd be more cautious about it, just in terms of I worry about her own state.
Yeah.
What drove her to do this, and is there a greater good in making sure, to Barb's point, is she capable of actually handling
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. If you know that if you don't run it, she's going to go to the next media out. She's going to go to, I don't know, what's the equivalent of the New York Times? not the New York Post, but you know what I mean? She's going to take it to another media outlet that is your competition. Someone is going to run it if you don't take it.
It's part of the decision tree. It is.
It is. And I'm not sure that has to be a binary thing. I think that at some point you got to say, it's not for me to do. Anyway, I raised the question only because I'm the guy in the room, and I didn't know, I thought, okay, ooh, geez.
Well, and to your point about the greater good, did this help fuel more women to come forward with their stories? I don't think so. To me, this wasn't about really the Me Too movement and supporting women and encouraging women to tell their stories.
Yeah. To me, it sounded like a woman who was manipulated by media to some degree.
That's so interesting that you say that, though, because she reached out.
I know. I realize that. I get it. And the only mention of another editor involved was, it ended up in our email. Here, check this out. and that was it. So the level of scrutiny at the other end for the Times, I think, was all the more reason, particularly Me Too, particularly a relatively young woman involved in this. And anyway, I just think that the optics around a whole lot of it, never mind the ethics.
Well, thank you for the story.
Yes.
It's one I'm saving for my journalism classes.
There you go.
Very good.
For those of you listening, check it out, because it's the daily. And again, we didn't answer any of the big issues here, and I don't think the New York Times tried to answer these questions in the podcast. I don't think they're answerable. This is the world that we live in, as far as journalists and newsrooms and managing editors, news directors, etc.
Well,
and
I think
there was a lot that went into that story.
And I think it's given people also a little look behind the scenes of how these things happen and how responsible journalism happens. You don't just get a note in your email and just go with it. There are a lot of steps that have to be taken before a story goes to print or goes to air. So
it is the daily, the New York Times, and if you listen to this, chances are you're probably already a daily subscriber and listener, but it was one that sort of stood out reasonably well. Barb DiGiulio, Kim Geddes, thanks for being here. This was
so
fun.
much
Come
fun.
back.
Thank you.
Will do.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.